double intro. Tash, she, her, and in the past I've worked as Ruby dev at ThoughtWorks, briefly at Cogent, and at a startup called Arcade. My career in hey! But my career in tech has included product management and developer marketing too. A little over a year ago, I built and launched my own product, Good Teams. I set out to build an alternative to generic job boards with a much stronger focus on engineering team culture, practices, and values. And teams have to meet certain criteria to be on the platform and pay monthly or yearly to have a featured profile. And so far, the product has earned around $8,000 in subscription revenue. And these are some of my customers. It's a modest success. It doesn't earn enough to support me full-time just yet. It probably won't be the next unicorn company. It's growing slowly and sustainably, but launching Good Teams has been incredibly rewarding. And I'm here to help you launch your own product too, utilizing your skills as a dev. So that could include a software as a service, a desktop or mobile app, an ebook, maybe a technical ebook on LeanPub, course that you might publish on Udemy, an asset bundle or a library, like a UI component library or a SaaS boilerplate kit, or maybe the paid tier of an open source project. But you already work hard enough, so why would you want to launch a product? The biggest thing is really just the challenge and reward. Yeah, it can be financially rewarding, but also it provides a really big sense of accomplishment to build and launch something on your own. It's a creative outlet, it can be really meaningful to be of service, and it's empowering. There's also a diversification aspect to it. I don't need to tell you that the level of job security in tech has kind of plummeted recently. It can be quite reassuring to have another income stream outside of your job, however modest that might be. And not to mention, it can be an additional source of meaning and self-esteem. It's also a really awesome opportunity to learn new tech and new skills. You can use whatever tech you want, you can build with whatever architecture you want, you can sharpen skills that you want to develop. You can finally build something with Elixir or the JavaScript framework of the week. Before Good Teams, I'd mainly done back-end Ruby, but Good Teams is really design and front-end heavy, so it really helped me get out of my comfort zone and build my skills as a full-stack developer and finally learn JavaScript properly. But there are some common mental barriers to launching a product, and some of you might be feeling some of these coming up right now. I don't have an idea. If I created a product, I wouldn't know how to get customers or sell it. If I created a product, I would have to do marketing. I don't have the free time or energy, and I'm going to equip you with the tools to hopefully overcome each of these barriers. And if after all that, you've still got no interest in launching a product, that's totally fine. The tips that I share here will hopefully be useful for work, personal, and open source projects too. So how can you find a good idea? So we'll start with the classic advice that many of you have probably heard before. Fix something in the world that bugs you, however small. Solve your own problems. Make your own life easier or better. Make a frequent process more efficient, something from work or your personal life, or just build something that you wish existed. But here's a different approach that you might not have heard before. Solve a meaningful problem for somebody that you know and care about. This is a great way to get ideas for products outside of your tech bubble. Maybe you build a product for your partner who's a garden designer, your sister who runs a brewery, or your best friend who's a paraglider. Sometimes it's a lot easier to look at other people's problems in a new light than it is to look at your own problems in a new light, because you're not so close to them, so you can be a little bit more objective. And here's a slightly different method that I use to find the idea for Good Teams, which is solve a problem for a community that you belong to or that you care about. I have a strong affinity for the software dev community, so I decided that I wanted to solve a problem for software devs. Communities that you care about could be people in specific job roles and teams, UX researchers, platform teams, people who have particular hobbies or interests, like people who are into ultralight hiking, lifestyles and identities, for example, people who are parents of children with ADHD. But it should be a community that you know and like, because sometimes people make the mistake of choosing a community to serve that they don't know or really feel an affinity before because it seems like a good community to build for, like maybe dentists or lawyers. They've got money to buy products, right? But this almost never works. Chances are you won't enjoy creating a product for a community that you just don't feel a connection to. You can also just try to solve a painful problem that you, your team, or another team have had at work. It should be a problem that you actually tried to solve, not one that you just endured. It can be at any job you've had, assuming the problem hasn't become obsolete because tech has changed. You can also solve problems that other people resonate with on forum threads and discussion boards. It's easiest to find these organically when you're already searching for a solution to your own problem, and you probably come across these sometimes day to day. You want to find threads where a lot of other people have the same problem and everyone's lamenting the lack of a good solution. And the most neglected, but arguably the easiest path, is build your own take on a successful but flawed product. What are the products or tools that you dislike but use because there's no good alternative? Are there products or tools or training that your company likes but uses anyway? People tend to shy away from these ideas because they assume they have to create something that's never existed before. And I think this bias comes from VCs searching for the next unicorn. But when it comes to creating a small, successful product, competition is actually the best form of validation. And a lack of competition is, in a lot of cases, a reason for pause. And if after all those methods you still have no idea, or to change your inputs, you often need to change your outputs, you need to change your inputs. So add new input, explore new hobbies, industries, communities, places, jobs, and technologies. You can also try thinking smaller. Look for and solve smaller problems. At the very least, you'll build your product muscle, even if it doesn't end up being the right idea for you. Don't focus on finding the perfect idea. Building anything will unearth new problems with the potential to unearth new solutions. Also, just build on your current strengths and experiences. In what niche, no matter how specific, are you world-class? What's your number one skill? What makes you unique? How could you create a product around that? You're much more likely to be successful with an idea that's an excellent fit for you. Okay, so now we're entering the danger zone, customer research. Because most customer research is an exercise in confirmation bias. The tendency to search for, interpret, favour, and recall information in a way that supports your pre-existing view of the world. Now, you've probably seen this, either been part of customer research like that or seen it done this way. So a bad initial question that I could have asked companies to try to validate my idea to build good teams is, okay, so tell me about your biggest challenges around recruiting great software engineers. And at first, this might seem like a reasonable question. If I ask any engineering manager this question, they're going to come up with some answers. They might say, well, sometimes we get a lot of applicants, but only a few of them are good. Interviewing takes up quite a lot of my time. But what if instead I opened with, what are the top 3 most annoying problems in your role at the moment? Recruiting software engineers might be nowhere to be found in this list. It may be like their 10th most painful problem. People don't spend time and money trying to solve their 10th most painful problem. So you can get into really risky territory when you do customer research that focuses the customer on your hypothesis area. The only validation that really matters is when the customer focuses you on their hypothesis, on their problem area. That's why I really love the approach of focusing on helping specific types of people rather than coming up with assumed problems. If you just want to do whatever is going to help that person the most, it's a really good foundation to have the kind of open-ended, unbiased conversation, which is the heart of really good customer research. So here are some actually good questions that you can ask. Tell me about the main problem that holds you or your team back from reaching their full potential. What's the hardest thing about being in your industry, your role, or your community? Which part of your job or your community do you dislike the most? They work because they're open-ended and they don't bias the interviewee toward your pet problem or solution. And here's the most important customer research question of all, because sometimes people have a high appetite to talk or complain about a problem, but a low appetite or a low capacity to actually solve it. You can check this by asking, what options have you explored so far to try to solve this problem? It's a really powerful filtering question because you can talk to people and they'll make it sound like a certain problem is like their number one priority in the world. And then you'll ask them, okay, what have you explored to try to solve this? And they'll be like, nothing really. I guess I could try this or that. And if you start to notice this pattern across multiple conversations, it could be a sign that people just aren't highly motivated to solve the problem. And here's a situation when you should probably just avoid customer research altogether, because sometimes you're going to have a really clear excitement to build a specific product or solve a particular problem, and that's totally okay. But if that's the case, customer research before you've built anything probably isn't going to be worthwhile because the risk of confirmation bias is just too high. So what if instead you relentlessly cut scope, create a super basic version in less than a month, and try to sell it? This method is highly resistant to confirmation bias. People will talk about problems that don't really matter to them, but they won't purchase solutions to problems that don't matter. Just a brief note, before you start working on a product, if you're currently or recently been employed, IP and non-compete clauses in your employment contracts are a thing, and companies do enforce them. Typically, they'll say something like you're not allowed to found or work at a competitor within a certain time period of your employment, which is pretty reasonable, but sometimes they can be surprisingly broad in the types of IP that they cover. So if you're not sure, reread your contract, make sure your idea couldn't be interpreted as violating your IP or non-compete clause, and if you're not 100% sure, just get clarification in writing for peace of mind. I'm not going to spend too much time on actually creating your product. And that's because people like us tend to be really confident about this part and much less confident about everything else. But there is one big risk in this area. The biggest mistake that programmers make when they're creating a product is spending too long building before they get their first customer. Then after a year of development in the dark, they find out nobody wants the thing they've made. Get something into the world as quickly as possible, even if you're embarrassed by it. Cut scope until you have something that helps with the problem you're trying to solve, even if it doesn't solve it completely yet. Actually card up your MVP scope before you start building, so you make any scope creep visible during this time. I'd recommend not spending more than 40 hours on a basic MVP. If you have a week off work, this is doable in a week. If you can only work on evenings and weekends, this might be doable in a month. And if you can only sneak away for 3 hours on a weekend, this could be doable in 3 months. Well, let's get to the number one challenge for software devs trying to launch their own product, is doing enough marketing and sales to turn something from a personal project into a real product. This is the time allocation that feels about right to us as builders. And this is the time allocation actually required to make a product successful. And now I'm talking about marketing in a room full of software developers. And some of you are probably starting to feel mildly uncomfortable. And I guess that's because we all have one thing in common, and it's that we have a deep-seated aversion to traditional sales and marketing. Our bias is that making things is good. Selling them is boring, scammy, cringe, pushy, annoying, something for other people and teams to worry about. And this negative mindset around sales and marketing is 100% justified because we're exposed to so much bad marketing and so many pushy salespeople. In psychological terms, we receive so much negative reinforcement around sales and marketing that we can't help but develop an aversion to it. But when marketing your product, you're going to do things completely differently. Let me explain. To market well, you're going to create free, no strings attached value for prospective customers. This is a really important mindset shift. Wouldn't the world actually be a better place if all marketing and sales was done in this spirit? And this approach isn't just more ethical, it actually works really well. So this is a product called PG Analyze. It's a Postgres performance monitoring and optimization product, and it's actually grown into a multiple seven-figure annual recurring revenue SaaS company. And they acquire their customers almost exclusively thanks to free database optimization tutorials and educational videos created by the founder, Lucas Fiddle. They grew to making 7 figures a year by creating free, no strings attached value for prospective customers. Sidekick needs no introduction in this room, but the core of Sidekick is a free and open source project. In other words, it provides free value to prospective customers, companies building on Ruby. It now generates roughly $2 million a year in revenue, and it has an open core business model, so you can use it for free and pay for additional functionality with a pro or enterprise plan. So here are some things that you could do to create free value and market your product. You could create tutorials, make a YouTube channel, release free tools, have a podcast, a newsletter, release open source, free ebooks, free courses, free communities like a Discord, and create social posts sharing helpful tips. But my favorite marketing method of them all is building in public. That means transparently sharing your journey as you try to create a successful product, including all of the ups and downs along the way. So how does this provide value? Well, it's educational, but it's also entertaining. We're hardwired to enjoy watching other people strive to achieve their goals. The entire entertainment industry is founded on this premise. TV, movies, sports, novels, you name it, people with goals are at the heart of all of them. From the moment you set out to create a product, you have a goal. That's interesting to people. And this is one area where you actually have an advantage as a solo developer trying to do something. A company with a goal, for the most part, nobody really cares. A person with a goal, people care. People relate to people, not companies. So you could create content by recording or journaling the work that you're doing to launch your product. The nice thing about this is that it's work that you'd be doing anyway, so it's actually a really efficient form of marketing. You could also just be radically transparent. Share your traffic, your customers, your revenue, even if they're low, even if they're non-existent. If they're growing, it's interesting. If they're not growing, it's interesting too. If your metrics are bad, that's interesting. It's an obstacle to achieving your goal. People love watching other people overcome obstacles. Be vulnerable. A lot of my most successful social media posts about good teams have been sharing failures, struggles, fears, and insecurities. This isn't something that people typically do, so it tends to stand out and capture attention. If you're able to share your fails as well as your wins, you'll always have something to share. Stories aren't interesting without struggle, and wins aren't compelling without failures along the way. But as you share your journey, try to make it relevant to prospective customers. So if your customer's technical, you can talk about tech problems you're solving as you build. If your customer's non-technical, you can zoom out. What are you learning about the problem or the industry that they might be interested in? You don't want to get stuck in an echo chamber of founders creating content for other founders rather than prospective customers. I would say challenge yourself to embrace video. Every social media platform optimizes for time on platform. Video generates time on platform. So every social media algorithm favors video content. And you have everything you need, probably in your pocket, to produce excellent video. Your phone is an incredible camera. You already share and record your screen and your voice at work. The most powerful editing software in the world, used by major movies and TV shows, is free and made in Melbourne, DaVinci Resolve. You don't need to edit like Mr. Beast. You don't need to create those awful thumbnails where you're like screaming. Just cut out the parts where you screw up, that's it. Okay, so let's talk about getting your first customers. Your early customers are almost always recruited one at a time rather than via one-to-many marketing. And that's because, truthfully, your product begins its life cycle with no credibility. But you have credibility. You have credibility within your network, your current and your former colleagues, your friends and family. In the beginning, people won't really be buying your product. They'll be buying your ability to solve their problem or teach them. So try to have one-to-one conversations with as many people in your market as possible. If they don't become customers, you'll still get great feedback. Talking to prospective customers is always valuable, regardless of the outcome. For us as software devs, text-based communication is often more comfortable for us, but it just doesn't seem to build trust as well as talking to someone face-to-face. You actually want to have meetings with people either in person or via a video call. So this is an email template that I've used to reach out to people, and this is how I got my first few customers for Good Teams. So I'd say Tash intro as the subject line, a subject that a human would actually write to another human. I say, good day, so-and-so, I'm Tash, a software engineer based in Melbourne. I'm reaching out to you because I'm trying to build something that helps X achieve Y. I really respect your expertise in this area, and I would love to get your thoughts on whether what I'm building actually makes a difference. Do you have 20 minutes this week for a quick intro and chat? And generally I found the uptake on this really to be quite high because it reads like, an email from a person to another person, not like a mass spam message. This sets up a feedback call that can turn into a separate sales call with the person's permission. So on the first call, you're really just talking to the person about their problems and challenges. You show them what you've built so far to help. If they don't seem keenly interested, you note down their feedback, thank them, you've made a new connection, you move on. If they do seem really interested, you can ask if they'd like you to share more details about what you're building in another call. Because you're doing this in response to their keen interest, usually they'll say yes. And typically you'd make that call 30 minutes, and in that call you'd take them through things like pricing and onboarding, etc. I would say charge from the first customer. Don't make it free to start with. And the reason for this is that free users aren't really good validation that you've built a business. I'll share a story from my experience. So recently I was on a sales chat for Good Teams that seemed to be going super well. The person seemed extremely excited about the idea and so eager to get their company on board. And then I mentioned that it costs money to have a featured profile because I work with companies personally to craft their profiles and take the time to interview software engineers on the team. The tone of the conversation totally changed, and they started to be much more negative because they thought it was free. And that was my mistake in not making it clear. But when it was free, it was all sunshine and rainbows. When you charge money, people have a completely different mental model for evaluating products and a much higher perception of risk. A free nice to have is a delightful gift, but a nice to have with a price tag usually isn't worth it. The quality of the feedback you get around your product will be far better if it has a meaningful price tag. But you can definitely give your first customers a really good deal. They deserve it because early adopters are truly special people. So here are the key takeaways that I want to leave you with. I really believe that everyone in this room, technical or not, has the ability to create a successful product business. Even a product that's a modest success that buys you and your partner or a friend dinner once a month is super rewarding. Cut scope, launch fast, show something to people and get them using it as quickly as possible, even if you're a bit embarrassed about it. Don't spend months or years toiling away in obscurity trying to get it perfect. The biggest obstacle for technical people is never making the thing. It's always marketing and sales. Most of us carry a deeply negative mindset about marketing and sales because it's almost always done poorly. But there are ways to do marketing and sales that provide meaningful value to people. You can create a successful product solely using this kind of value-based marketing. There's so much that I didn't have time to cover here: pricing, business models, metrics. If you think you might want to launch a product, here are some things you should Google. Startups for the Rest of Us, which is a podcast for bootstrapped SaaS founders. the MicroConf channel on YouTube, which has talks from bootstrapped, mostly technical founders, mostly software devs, and then the interviews on Indie Hackers, which has a library of interviews with hundreds of software devs who've built all kinds of products, from courses to SaaS to UI component libraries. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. My product is Good Teams app. And if you end up launching your own product, please tell me. I will totally repost it or help you any way I can. I'll be so excited for you. And good luck. Thank you so much.